So to kick things off, my name's Ryan O'Hara. I work here at Brooklyn SolarWorks as our business development manager. A lot of my work over the past few years has been working directly with co-op and condo boards across the city to sort of walk them through the process of going solar. And I've worked with many boards of all shapes and sizes. So I assume those on the call today are a member of their own co-op. And so this talk today is all about getting you the information you need to bring to your board to potentially get your co-op to go solar one day. Because, spoiler alert, the question, can my co-op go solar? Absolutely it can. And today we're just going to walk through the process, the tax incentives and other incentives available for the projects. And then I'm going to share 3 different examples of some co-op projects we've worked on over the years. So my company, Brooklyn SolarWorks, we are a New York City only installer. We got started about 11-ish years ago. And primarily we got started because some of the larger developers 10 plus years ago, for whatever reason, were staying clear of New York City. It's a unique housing landscape for sure. It's a unique place to install solar. So we, over the years, have developed our company to really exclusively focus on New York City. I'm born and raised in Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn, and so it's been really special for me to work throughout the neighborhoods I grew up in. Now, since our inception in 2015, we've installed just over 3,000 solar systems. Vast majority have been on sort of single to 4 family homes across the city, but more and more of those projects are now on co-op and condo buildings ranging from 4 units to 80 to 200 unit buildings. We're an all in-house company based in Gowanus, Brooklyn. And, we take contracting very serious, and that's a core part of our business model, is making sure customers of all shapes and sizes receive the proper customer service before the installation and then certainly after we've installed your solar panels that we're here to stay. So today we're just going to specifically tailor our discussion for co-op projects. And so I'm going to talk about some of the incentives available for co-ops in New York City. I'm going to show some of the different designs that we can offer depending on what your building is looking to do. And then, like I said, I'll share 3 different examples on 3 different shapes, 3 different size co-ops, and talk a little bit about the design process and what made them select the option they went with. So to get started, as you probably have been seeing in the news, the federal government is not currently showing a lot of love for the clean energy industry, specifically solar. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I would just use that point to highlight that we are in New York City, and New York City for a long time has been a leader in clean energy, and combined with New York State and New York City incentives, we're still in one of the richest places to go solar, and that's largely due to city and state government that have consistently shown up and shown that New York wants to be a leader when it comes to these technologies. So here are the 3 key incentives. I'm going to go through them one by one. The first is and for a co-op building, this is the easiest one to understand. This is a 4-year property tax abatement that the city provides you, and that's worth 30% of your solar cost. So not 30% of your property taxes, but 30% of your investment. So in this example, $200,000 solar system, you can expect a abatement worth $60,000. Again, spread out over 4 years, and you'll just see that quarterly when you're going through your property tax statements. This kicks in usually a year after the solar installation is complete. So we, as a solar contractor, file that incentive for you when you install solar, and so there's no additional paperwork required by the co-op itself. This is done by us, the solar contractor, and is spread out over 4 years. The second tax incentive that's provided by New York State is a New York State income tax credit for residents. So this goes directly to owners and shareholders and is claimed on a prorated basis. So based on the number of shares or your ownership percentage within the building will determine your credit amount. And it's up to 25% of the overall expense. And the key note here, this is every building is case by case, but this credit can only be claimed by primary residents, folks that have this as their primary residence. So if you're a sponsor unit that owns within a co-op, you're unable to claim this state credit. It's specifically for residential primary residence folks. All right. But again, up to 25% of the overall cost can come back to you. So just with tax incentives, you're getting a little over half of the cost back via these two incentives. And then the last incentive is a rebate from NYSERDA. This is through their New York Sun program, and it is based on a per watt basis. So depending on the amount of solar that you install on the rooftop, that will determine your rebate amount. And so I have an example in the next slide here, but generally speaking, for an average size system, about 50 kilowatts, 50,000 watts, you'll get 45 cents per watt back, which is a little over $22,000. So that just comes off of your upfront investment. And so whereas the tax incentives are claimed over time after the fact, this rebate comes off right away off the top. And I should highlight that if you live in an affordable housing building or are doing this as a community solar project, there's higher incentives available. So if, again, you haven't received a proposal from us or a contractor previously, feel free to reach out to us and we can give you something over email that you can share with your fellow shareholders and neighbors. Now, really quick, how does solar work? I would say this graph is really representative of the basics on this system that is referred to across the country as net metering. There's many different systems depending on what state you're in, but net metering is essentially the idea that your solar system is generating power during the day. A lot of the time, that excess generation, a lot of that power you don't need in real time, right? In the middle of the day, a lot of folks might be home, away at work, not at their house or at the apartment building. And so that excess generation is not really needed in the co-op itself. That extra power is then pushed back out into the grid during those peak times during the day where solar production is high and energy consumption is low. And Con Ed, the utility company, will purchase that power back at, depends on the setup, but it could be a variable rate. And those credits then flow back to your building in the evening time and during hours where the sun is no longer shining. So this give and take relationship basically works out to be what's we've referred to as like a virtual battery system. So we're not currently installing energy storage with these solar systems. Instead, we're relying on the grid to purchase the excess power back from you, and then those credits you generate go back to your bill. And they come back to you via a bill credit. And again, this is without storage in place. If storage one day comes into New York City and is scalable, that excess production you see here on the graph, rather than it going straight to the grid, that excess production would actually feed your storage, your batteries, charge those batteries up. So as the sun sets and you start to have to pull power from other sources, rather than going to the grid first, you can pull from your batteries. Now this is a pretty high level cost breakdown, but I if you bring this idea to your board, the first question someone's going to ask is, how much is this going to cost? And so here is a sample cost breakdown for I want to say 60 or so unit co-op that I modeled for in Brooklyn just the other day. So overall cost before any rebates is a little over $200,000, $214K. Now, I mentioned there's a rebate via NYSERDA, so that rebate comes off the top. So the number the co-op is responsible for out of pocket is post-rebate, which is $172,000. You get the state credit the year after the solar goes in, and then you get that abatement over 4 years. So your net cost after incentives, that $214,000 investment comes down to under $100,000, 87 in this example. And this system, because it's generating electricity savings, has a return on investment. So conservatively, we estimate 7 years for this project. If rates continue to rise the way they are, that will only get better. And over 25 years, this system, like many, will generate hundreds of thousands of dollars of avoided electricity costs. Now, $214,000, $172,000. These are big numbers, and I'm sure when you're bringing this idea to a co-op board, there's many other capital improvement projects that you're considering. And so, why is solar unique? Why is solar worth doing ahead of some of those other potentially more pressing projects? It's simply put because there's a return on investment, and the return on investment's only getting better as rates go up. So when you bring this idea to the board, what you're essentially trying to do here is pre-purchase a lot of your electricity up front. And essentially what that does is it locks you into a rate, because while most people have no choice but to pay the rise in electricity bill each and every month, with solar you all of a sudden now have a choice on where you get some of your power from. And so essentially when you install a $200,000 solar system, you're paying $200,000 for electricity that you will be getting from the sun for the next 25 plus years. So you're basically hedging your bets here. The rates seem to go up every year. I've been doing this 8 years, and the average cost of power we modeled 8 years ago was 22 cents on average. When we model a lot of projects now for a residential setting, it's not surprising to model 34 to 36 plus cents per kilowatt hour. That is astronomical compared to the rest of the country. We have very high rates, and it only seems to be going up, especially with data centers coming online soon. And again, energy costs, if you look at your statements each and every year, they've only gone up. And this is one avenue you can take to help getting those costs under control. So I have a little slideshow in a second here, just talking you through the process. But most projects, if all goes well, take 3 to 6 months to complete. Now that's very dependent on the size of your project. If it's a bigger building with a bigger solar system, that will take a little bit longer. But for a lot of the co-ops we work with, 3 to 6 months is pretty standard and the timeline we strive for. And this is a little walkthrough on the process. So if you have not reached out to us before, after this webinar, you can send me an email, you can book an appointment online, give us a call. Start with a call. We talk through your building's needs, the roof condition, an assortment of questions we'll have for you to just get a sense on what you're looking to do with this project. And then from there, we'll put together a proposal, a design that we'll talk through. We'll meet with your board to go over it. And at a certain point, if the project looks good and you want to move to the next step, we would come out for a site visit after you sign a letter of intent, just saying that you're strongly considering moving forward with the project, and you're giving us access to your roof and your electrical setup. That allows us to put together a final contract. Once the contract's signed, then the work really begins. And most of the work does not involve you. It involves our permit team, our engineering team, to work with New York City Department of Buildings, Con Edison, FDNY, in some cases landmarks, all the different city agencies needed to get a system permitted with Con Ed and DOB, and then ready for installation. So you're looking at least 2 to 6 months sometimes for a permit cycle to finish. And again, that's very dependent on your project, but 2 to 6 months is pretty standard. And then the work itself, again, depends on the size of your system, but generally speaking, it takes about 1 week to 2, depending on the size, to complete the actual roof installation. And then lastly, once the system's online, it takes a couple of weeks to get it signed off with the city. So that requires an in-person inspection with DOB and then some other sign-offs with Con Ed as well as DOB. And that takes a couple of weeks. And then you have a turned-on solar system generating electricity for you. But again, the first step, if you haven't reached out to us already, reach out to us, give us a call. We'll get you a quote so you can start discussing the project in detail with your board members. So I'm going to talk through some of the different designs that we offer, right? Because there's going to be a lot of questions, I'm sure, from your neighbors and your board members on aesthetics. How will this look on my roof? What will this do to my actual roof? And we have options depending on what you're looking to do here, okay? We're not going to force you into a decision on what option you should do. It requires a lot of feedback from the board and your community on how do we want to use our roof space moving forward? So we'll obviously look at your bills and how much power you consume to start. That's the first thing that's most important. We'll look at your roof and see how much space you have to work with. Is it a realistic solar site? Because, we're in New York City, and as I'll show you in a second, not every roof is good for solar. And we want to be honest with you when we do an assessment. So there's plenty of times where a roof is too small or too crowded for solar to really make sense and for it to pencil out. And we'll let you know that in our early design stage. So brings me to my next slide here. So we could put solar on both of these rooftops for sure. However, what's a better candidate? Obviously the one on the right, because generally what we look for to make solar systems financially work out the best, generally a lower rise building, 4 to 6 stories on average, pretty standard for a New York co-op, just manageable to get the panels to the roof, but then also the electrical power from the roof to the basement. So the building on the left is much taller than standard for projects we take on. So there's complications there. And then there's multiple roof levels that really limits the amount of space we have to work with. So yes, building on the left could work, and we could probably put a proposal together. But if you have a roof like the one on the right, you're in a much better position, and solar will just be a much better fit likely for the roof on the right than it is on the left. But again, it starts with a phone call. Call us. If you talk to me, I'll be honest and I'll tell you right away whether it's worth investigating or if it's just not the best site. No hard feelings either way. Okay, and then this is what I'm sure a lot of you are curious about. How does it look on the roof? What are our options? These are the 3 main options, okay? And we can give you proposals for any of the ones you prefer. We might start with a recommendation after looking at your roof, what makes the most sense. But that's for you to determine and let us know what you want to see. So first off is our canopy system. We, as Brooklyn SolarWorks, worked with a design studio 10 years ago, Sit2 Studios, to patent and design a solar canopy. And this canopy structure rises above the roof 9 feet to allow firemen access underneath, to allow roof space to be utilized for HVAC equipment, for roof decks, for green roofs. The canopy is a little bit more expensive than other systems, but it provides you with cool flexibility while also keeping a lot of the roof space open and clear for either future use or just fireman access, which is always required on these rooftops. So the canopy on the left was built on a manufacturing center over in Long Island City, but I'll have an example of a canopy on a co-op in a slide coming up. Our most standard system across all the different housing stocks in New York City is our tilt rack design. Now this is mounted directly to the roof surface, right? So it penetrates the roof deck, requires roof attachments, but this allows you to work around skylights, vents, HVAC equipment, while also leaving access to firemen pathways. And as you can see on the picture here, we're not able to use all of the roof space because a lot of that open roof space is used and required FD&Y clearance. But the tilt rack just gets you the best bang for your buck oftentimes. Because not only are you able to fit basically more solar than other options, you're also able to pitch the solar an optimal direction. So ideally you're looking at 15 degrees if you can get it in New York City. That's pretty ideal to capture the most sunlight. And the tilt rack, like I said, is what we build the most of here at Brooklyn SolarWorks. And while it costs a little bit more than the next option I'm going to describe, tends to give you the best bang for your buck because it gets you the most solar in most cases. And then the tilt rack is often also, it's what we call the system, but a lot of people around the industry would call it a tilt-up system or simply a mechanically attached system. And then finally, the final option, which is also great for co-ops, is a ballasted array. And a ballasted system basically alleviates roof warranty concerns by avoiding or limiting the amount of roof attachments needed. So these systems primarily are engineered to limit roof penetrations and instead opt for a weighed down style system. So simply using concrete blocks to weigh down the panels is one way of alleviating the need for roof penetrations. So as I'll explain in a couple of slides here, if a roof is recently redone and you don't want to involve a roofer too much and cause, having to deal with a full warranty compliance process, the ballasted array can oftentimes keep that warranty in compliance by, again, limiting the amount of penetrations needed. And it's also a much lower cost solution. And I have some examples coming up here. So yeah, that's case in point here. So this is the first sort of co-op I want to highlight. It's over in Jackson Heights, Queens. They've had solar now for about 5 years. And this solar system is ballasted, as you can see, so no roof penetrations were required here. And the desire for that was mainly because the board, right before solar, installed a brand new roof system. And so they did not want to add additional cost to integrate the solar system into the new roof. And so that's why they opted for a lower cost ballasted solution that avoided roof penetrations altogether. And this is an 84 unit building, 6 stories, and this solar system is offsetting their common area costs, which, if I remember correctly, is just north of like $15,000 or so a year. So this is generating real savings for this co-op. And, as the rates have gone up over the years, folks like this are not at all affected, because in this case, they were able to offset all of their costs with their roof, which is pretty awesome. Not every roof, not every co-op can do that, but this co-op succeeded in doing that. They're in the historic area of Jackson Heights. And happy to speak more with this. We have a couple of contacts at the board who do walkthroughs sometimes for shareholders that are interested in seeing the system in person. And so yeah, follow up with me afterwards if you're ever curious to see a system in person or would like to connect with a fellow co-op member in a different co-op to talk about their experience. Second system, one of my favorites, just a really cool story. We partnered with Solar One on this co-op, and it's a small 8-unit HDFC co-op that was installed way back in 2017. And this co-op is unique because, well, we can start with the design. As you can see on the screen here, this is a mix of a canopy system, right, which you see in the middle of the roof there, along with that lower tilt rack system. So we call it a hybrid array. And hard to tell, but also beneath that system is, believe it or not, a green roof. So already this is a unique project, but what makes it even more unique, and this is something I'd be happy to talk to you and about your building with afterwards, this is what's called a community solar system. Specifically, it's an on-site community solar system. So these panels on the roof are generating electricity every day. Those excess credits that they're generating, right? Those credits are sold to Con Ed, right? Con Ed buys them, buys the extra power from the co-op, and then that excess credits get distributed to individual shareholders within the co-op, right? This is an 8-unit co-op, so every apartment within the co-op each month is getting the benefit of their solar system. And the system with Con Ed is community distributed generation, but simply put, it's community solar. When you think of community solar, you often think of big sprawling farms upstate, out west, big deserts filled with solar panels. But even in Brooklyn, you can do community solar on an 8-unit affordable housing co-op. And we have worked with more and more co-ops like this. If you're a co-op that fits that description, you should reach out, because as I mentioned earlier, there's incentives specifically for affordable housing. There's a higher rebate for affordable housing that way back when this co-op was able to take advantage of. And it's still available. It's not an endless amount of money that's available, but it is currently available, I would expect, for the next 6 months or so. And yeah, again, this is another really unique setup, but there's so many co-ops just like this one that I think could benefit from the same style setup, same style design, everything. This can be replicated over and over again. And then the last one I want to highlight, this is a relatively new one that we worked with, really cool self-managed co-op over in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. They're 24 units, but in this case, they opted for a tilt rack design, right? They had just put on a relatively new roof not that long ago. So in coordination on this project, we coordinated with a roofer that was certified with their manufacturer of the roof. And so each of the attachments we had to make into the roof was flashed and sealed by a roofer, a certified roofer. So the warranty was not voided whatsoever. And so basically this solar system is now fully integrated into their roof system. And the power here, in a similar way, is also being generated for the whole building, not just the common area, but this system will be generating power for everyone, also via community solar. And that's the dream. I hope we can do more and more of these moving forward. But again, every building's a little different, and so we custom and tailor each proposal based on your building, and then again, your desires. What do you look to do with this kind of project? Is it just for local law 97 compliance? Is it to maximize your roof space and make it an amenable space so people can hang out underneath the system? We're open to your ideas and suggestions, and it always just starts with a phone call. It will be either with me or one of our other colleagues who is well-versed in solar here in the city. And with that, one thing, if you join the webinar and you're thinking about getting a proposal from us, we're offering a discount for anyone that attended, so just mention that when you speak with us, and we'll make sure to apply that to your project. And with that, I'm going to take a sip of water, and then I think we got a bunch of questions already. So yeah, and the first one, Jordan asked about the New York Sun Rebate, which I had mentioned earlier, is through NYCERTA. And that is, again, dependent on the size of your project and what kind of building you are in. But the question is, does the solar installer also apply for the New York Sun Rebate? The answer is yes. Pretty much 95% of the time, we will file that on your behalf. And we receive the rebate ourselves. So that's why in a project like this, you're only responsible for the post-rebate incentive. Hope that makes sense. Someone also asked, what are you looking for in an on-site regard to roof condition electrical setup? What is required for solar? That's a great question. So I should say a lot of the work we do is done before we've even been on site. So a lot of our modeling and system design can be done without a full on-site inspection because, number one, we're pretty familiar with these buildings and their electrical setups. Now, everything's a little different, but we often just assume the worst to start, right? So we'll oftentimes assume we're going to have to do some electrical work to tie in the existing system. With regard to the rooftop, we'll want to see existing roof warranty documents and structural drawings if you have those. But it's really important. It wasn't mentioned in my process slide, but once we start work on a project, we do have to work with a structural engineer as well as an electrical engineer to take a probe of the roof in most cases to ensure that the system we propose, either ballasted, canopy, or tilt rack, whatever we decided, the roof can hold the weight of and is prepared to withstand the weight of the solar system, because we need our DOB plans stamped by a structural engineer. So they're involved early in our process, and then for electrical feasibility, oftentimes we'll be installing our own dedicated solar breakers. So oftentimes you'll need to make sure all of your electric is up to code. We'll be able to determine that pretty quickly during an on-site inspection. But most co-ops we work with can oftentimes accommodate the existing solar system without too much additional electrical work. There's a lot of ways we can maneuver it where we can avoid hefty increases on the electrical cost side. Yeah, someone had a question about this case study. So this, as I said, this building was spending upwards of $15,000 a year, and their question was, saves common area costs, including what? Light-in? Light-in for sure. I would say what we see the biggest driver of in a lot of these cases is elevator usage. So if you live in a co-op with elevators, you pay a lot of money for that use. And so when we see high electricity bills, oftentimes it's due to elevator costs. And then also if there's extra facilities within the co-op's common area, like laundry rooms, workout areas, common spaces. Electric heat is becoming more and more of a thing on common area loads. So it's a wide range. But if you're just a co-op that has just light-in as their common area costs, likely solar could cover a lot more than that. And that's when you look at something smaller like a community solar system. That's when we get into that territory. And so Jordan had a question on case study 2 here, which is why did they opt for a hybrid array of canopy and tilt rack? That's another good question. So the canopy adds a considerable amount of cost to the project. And in this case, I didn't work directly with this board. So sometimes you can be a little prohibitive with doing a canopy all the way across the rooftop just because of the added cost. But as I talk to you, I do believe that this is a historic part of Crown Heights. I actually know for sure it is a historic part of Crown Heights. And so my feeling here is maybe there were some cost limitations, but the primary reason why we have the canopy focused towards the middle of the roof and not all the way at the back is to avoid visibility from a back angle that landmarks might shoot down. That's my theory. But like I said, the design process can become one of those back and forth parts of the process where, you know, the board is looking for options and we'll present them with a number of design options, and at the end of the day it's up to them what they prefer to do. All right. Katharina asks, can one lease panels as opposed to buy a system so that one does not have those upfront costs? That's a really good question. So we don't have a lot of leasing options at the moment. What we do have is a number of financing partners that can alleviate the upfront costs just by extending the payback, you know, taking out a 5 to 10 or 20-year term loan to pay for the system. Leases are becoming more of a thing now. And for residential homes, if you live in your own home and you own all of your roof rights, we could offer a solar lease to you for 10 years. But for co-ops and condos, we're not currently offering that. However, we have a couple partners we're now working with that, depending on the size of your project, could be interested. There's definitely some size limitations to having leases work for larger co-ops. So if you live in, I think, a larger co-op, we're talking over 25,000 square feet, feel free to reach out to me and ask about lease options because they exist. It's just not something that's super built into our current business model. Okay, the other question from Katharina was, can one build on a 16-story building? The answer is yes. While not the most ideal, as I mentioned earlier, we're about to start work on a 17-story co-op in Manhattan that, the number is still penciled out, right? So it's all about the higher your building is, the more complicated it will get. But as long as you can still install a substantial amount of solar on the rooftop, that will make a difference here. So we run the numbers for all, and that is, again, the nice thing about the work I do is that, we're betting on the sun to keep shining, and then the numbers we run, they're conservative, but they always speak for themselves, right? So if you are interested in running the numbers for your co-op, just reach out to us with some copies of your Con Ed bills, and we'll run a proposal. If it's a 16-story building or a 4-story building, we'll run a proposal if there's enough roof capacity, and you'll be able to determine whether the numbers are justified, if the expense is worthwhile. Is the higher the building less feasible because the more floors means electrical costs more? Yeah, that's exactly right, to whoever wrote that question. So, every floor you add, right, you're adding more electrical loads, so more electrical costs. but you're not getting any more roof space with that. So that becomes definitely a challenge. So you're adding more and more electrical use and loads, but you're not getting any more roof space to put more solar panels on. So you're limited with the amount of space you have on the rooftop. So there's that piece. But then the other piece I think I might have touched on, to get the equipment to the roof, like the taller the building, the potentially more expensive a crane you'll need to get that equipment up there. And then additionally, sometimes the biggest challenge on taller buildings is getting the electrical system connected, the panels connected to your existing electrical system. That tends to be the biggest challenge. If there's nowhere on the roof level to tie in the solar panels, we'll have to bring that power all the way down to the basement, which, think about it, on a 16, 17-story building, that's a long way to go. So those are added costs as well. So hey, as I said, we're only in New York City, so we certainly work on taller buildings. There's just, they're not always the best candidates for solar. But again, that's for us to determine for you. So you give us a call if you're curious. So one of the questions was, do you offer zero cost turnkey solar systems that are paid for by energy savings? Not exactly. So we do not have a zero cost sort of option out of pocket here. These systems certainly do pay for themselves via energy savings, but in most of our cases, there is that upfront investment required. Otherwise, you take out a loan to finance it. So, as I said, depend on the size of your property and your co-op. If you're interested in a scenario where you don't own the panels, you just lease the roof space, and you really limit the out-of-pocket cost to zero, we can discuss that. Like I said, we have a couple of partners that we work with on larger projects, right? So it really just depends. So if, Stephen, you want to send me an email, I'm happy to discuss further on some zero cost options. But generally speaking, our experience over the years, a lot of these co-ops are purchasing the system outright. Either they just refinance and they have the capital on hand, they're pulling from their reserves, or they're doing a special assessment on their shareholders. And like I said, we have a financing partner or two that I can also connect you with. And so our job is to be a resource. I'm committed to getting more solar deployed across New York City. And I understand, especially in this day and age, that costs are only going up for everyone. And solar, when it comes to capital improvement projects, is not always top of the list. So finding ways to lower that out-of-pocket cost is really important. And so I'm happy to work with you and figure out some solutions that work for you. Yeah, Jordan, good question. So they asked, do these costs estimate you shared, does it include all project costs, electrical installation, or just the cost of the panels? This is a turnkey solution. You can see on the left everything that it includes. We do all of our work in-house, and this is a full turnkey price to get a system installed. There's really no hidden costs here. There's no additional cost after the fact. This is your all-in cost for solar. And like I said, we can do a pretty darn close preliminary estimate just from satellite imagery to get you sort of a pretty firm number to bring to your board. But this is just a range for sort of a medium-sized co-op. If you're in a smaller co-op, you're looking at definitely probably half that cost. But then, of course, if you're in a much, much larger, many hundreds of units size co-op, you could be looking at a larger upfront investment. Depends on a lot of factors here. Yeah, another question, does your team work with New York City Accelerator? Absolutely. I've worked with a number of co-ops that were connected to me via New York City Accelerator. So they're a great resource. If you're a building that's impacted by Local Law 97, for example, we actually didn't really talk about that today, but I'm sure some of you on the call are in a co-op that is impacted by 97 and you're looking for solutions and just looking for answers. Accelerator is a great resource, and if you decide, hey, solar is something we want to pursue, New York City Accelerator has an existing contractor network. We're one of the solar contractors on there, and they can connect you directly with us. So they're a great resource, sort of a third-party resource if you're looking for clarity, because there's a lot of companies out there that do what we do. But if you're looking for sort of a third-party opinion to sort of vet the numbers and the bid that you've received, I would say Accelerator is a pretty good resource for that. Could we build on an 18-floor building with over 300 units? Absolutely. Again, it depends on the roof, right? Like I said in this example, if you want as much roof space as you can get. So, I don't think this is 18 stories. This might be a little bit below. Like I said, we'll run the numbers for you. Give me a call or send me an email right after this, and we'll run an analysis and see if it makes sense. And Barry has a question. Which solar panels do you prefer? The short answer is anything that's a tier 1 solar panel. Now, what tier 1 means, it's an industry term basically to determine states basically a strongly vetted and financially strong company. So any solar panel manufacturer that is labeled as a tier 1, we generally will prefer. Once you drop below tier 1, you're looking at much more shoddy equipment and just cheaply made panels, where if you go with a tier 1 company, tier 1 panel manufacturer, you're looking at high quality, strong financial backing, so there's a warranty on the panels, the warranty's sound if the company making them is sound. But just so you have two brands to think about, the two we probably use the most right now are Q-Cells and JA Solar, both of whom we've been installing for years and are tried and true and pretty reliable when it comes to performance, right? Like, I can't tell you once where we had a panel installed and we had to remove it because it wasn't working. Sometimes panels are default when you get them in the warehouse, but panels, once they're installed, don't fail. If they fail, it's less than 1%. And that's me being 100% honest, working here 8 years doing solar. Solar is one of those technologies that just works great. And let's see. And then just as we're talking manufacturers, those are the two panel manufacturers, JA Solar and Q-Cells, that we like and currently use the most right now. In terms of inverters, right, because you have your solar panels and then you have your inverters that convert the power from DC electricity to AC, so you can use it in your home, in your apartment building. We use Enphase inverters and Solar Edge and a little bit of SMA inverters. Again, depends on your project type. So one other question from Jordan: what does maintenance look like, and what is the estimated lifespan? That's a really good question, and something I always get asked this question. And the panels, as I said earlier, they're warranted for 25 years, but the degradation levels that these manufacturers state, these tier 1 companies I've mentioned, they say degradation only goes about 0.4% per year. So these panels are degrading at quite a low level. And so at year 25, based on those degradation levels, those panels are still cranking at 85+% of their original output. So the true lifespan is probably 30, 40 plus years. Obviously technology will get better, but those panels will be working quite well long after their warranty has expired. And what does maintenance look like? We didn't talk too much about it, but on all of our systems we have 10-year production guarantee, which basically holds us accountable as a contractor. Once we install your system, we're on the hook should anything go wrong, because if your system underperforms, we have to cut you a check for the difference. So maintenance for 10 years is basically included in our proposal cost, but I can tell you it's quite low. And that's all because the software is connected to the internet. So we can monitor the system from our office in Gowanus. You and your board members and the super can also get access to the monitoring. So if something goes wrong, you'll be notified, as will we. And because it's under our 10-year production guarantee and workmanship warranty, we'll be out to fix it ASAP. again, if the system stops working for a short period of time, every hour of sunlight that you're missing out on could impact your production guarantee. So we take our work pretty seriously once we install your system and want to make sure we're there in case something goes awry. Okay, and Barry, I have a question from you. How many hours of sunlight do you need daily, and what if neighboring buildings partially block early morning or late afternoon sun? That's another really good question. So it all starts again with that initial feasibility study, which is you call me after this call, you give me your address, and just looking at the Google satellite, we can get a very good sense, generally speaking, of sunlight hours and possible shade and obstructions that could impact a solar system. So if you have buildings that are partially block early morning or late afternoon sun, that's not surprising because we're in New York City. I imagine you're probably somewhere in Manhattan. If that's the case, we'll model that in our production estimate, right, when we put a proposal together. The answer to how many hours of sunlight do you need, there's not an easy answer to that question, Barry, but it's for us to determine right off the bat. And so if truly the shade is coming from the east and the west, so afternoon and morning, not terrible, because what's most important is that middle of the day sunshine. That's when your solar power will be most valuable, number one. And number two, that's where the sun will be the most of the year. So as long as your southern middle of the day sun is not that obstructed, solar will likely make a lot of sense for your building. But reach out after the call and we can give you a final a proposal that accounts for any shade from neighboring buildings. No problem. All right, I have a few more questions, and then, yeah, if you have any others, please write them in the chat, but just a couple more here. Now, do I need other members of the co-op to agree to go solar? You do, in most cases. Now, we've worked with small condos. If you have roof rights above you, you could probably do this with not much pushback from the board, but most of the time these are board decisions, so you need board buy-in and support to do this. I should say, I've been working with co-ops for many years. If something about today is interesting, you want to bring this project to your board and pitch it, please tap me as a resource. I have come to love a good old board meeting. I enjoy communicating this information to folks and answering their questions, because there will always be questions and concerns on these projects, because it's still a relatively new concept and new technology for co-ops particularly. And I'm happy, if schedule allows, to join a meeting and present this project to you all. All right, looks like we have two more questions, and then we'll wrap things up for today. Can residents individually benefit from the solar energy generated? So as I mentioned, and I think in case study 2 here, in some cases you can. Like I said, it's generally better suited for those 4 to 20-ish unit size buildings, just because there's enough roof space to give them sizable electricity savings. In theory, you could spread benefits to all 84 units on this co-op, for example, but if you split up the savings amongst 84 people, the savings will be relatively small, right? In this case, every unit owner here is seeing sizable savings, and that's because it's 8 units. So it's in the right range of building size that makes it quite attractive. Barry, just doing another question. What do you think of Sunpower panels? Not something we really installed. We installed way back when we first got started in like 2015, 2016, but they have a lot of restrictions on, like, basically you only have to use their products, and just for us, we just sort of ceased working directly with Sunpower. But, they have systems across the country and the city, and for the most part work pretty well. I believe they are out of business though. So, if you're seeing a proposal with Sunpower panels, you might want to look elsewhere. And again, we're here to help if you have questions on specific products or panels that you want our opinions on. But I should say, when we do a proposal together, our proposal will show you the equipment that we're confident in right? We'll tell you the brand that we're expecting to install, and we're only going to lead with equipment that we're comfortable with, and equipment that we feel good about offering to a customer. And then one last proposal, how do I get the tax credits? Well, as I mentioned, one of the first tax incentives is a property tax abatement. There's no action needed on the co-op's behalf for that. You just have to be paying property taxes, and we as the contractor will file for that incentive on your behalf. The state tax credit is something that you will file for on your behalf. So if your co-op goes solar this year in 2026 and you're a shareholder within the co-op, the following year you will claim a portion of what the co-op spent on your state taxes and claim a 25% tax credit on that amount. So we provide you with those forms, but in order to get that tax credit, it's on you as an individual to file for those when you do your personal taxes next tax season. All right. And before we wrap things up, please let me know if there's any other questions before you lose me. Here is my information at the back of the slideshow. My name is Ryan again. I am happy to answer any questions or concerns that you have about presenting solar to your co-op. I want, like I said earlier, I want to see more co-ops go solar. It's crucial that co-ops understand how these investments work, and to get them to realize that there's actually a lot of energy savings and positive benefits that can come from a project like this. So I hope you all learned a lot today. Please follow up with me if you have further questions. And I'd end it with just good luck on your fight to get this in front of boards. And please look to us as a resource. You know, we call each other solar warriors here. It's a little cheesy, but essentially that's what we're doing, right? We're fighting against big companies like Con Ed, big oil and gas. We're fighting against these fuel-based energy sources and move into a renewable source that we strongly believe in. So that's why we call ourselves solar warriors. And for those on the call that want to pitch this to their board, I'm tasking you with being a solar warrior. And yeah, I wish you all luck, and thanks again for joining, and please reach out if you have questions or want to get a proposal from us. Thanks, everyone. Take care.